Rupam tasya Brajamurupurummatulindashtabhati Radha Kundam Girivaram Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yasha Pratitagripraya Shri Gurum Tamatushmi Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvaiva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Nikhila Shruti Mole Ratnamala Nirajita Padapankajam Ajimukta Kulaira Prashyamanam Parikrishna Dinam Samshayani Anavapita Charimutira Karunayavatarnakalam Shamarpayitamunnata Bhakti Hari Purata Sundara Bhyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hriday Kandareshwara Vasachinandana Ajanulambita Bhujo Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaro Dhiyavaro Gadadhara Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavatarao Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namaskritam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Bhutesh Bhupikapanta Radha Radhe Vrindavanadisha Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadam Jadarshan Mahim Padiyatam Bhakta Vihinaya Aparadha Lakshaya Ityashtakamaditarangmate Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Prapanam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Srila Gurudev Ki Jai Sriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Kartik Brat Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Praman Hari Hari Bo So pranam to all of you from Sri Radha Kunda, and I hope you may be continuing having a very absorbed Kartik and deep connection with all that this unique month represents in our Gaudiya tradition. So we are meeting again, as usual, every Thursday for any Q&A, any questions and answers, ISTAGOSTHI, which basically implies giving ourselves the time to delve into further detail about those things that cannot be like ascertained otherwise, basically. So that's a particular format or expression of Sri Harikatha, in which we are giving the opportunity, or we give ourselves the chance to present questions and receive answers. And in this way, go into further detail beyond a public, official, general presentation of any given topic. And this is a very crucial, important aspect of the learning process in our school. Krishna himself is mentioning that pariprashnena, pranipatena, pariprashnena. So pariprashnena implies presenting questions in humble mood, humble mood basically means with the interest of refining our service disposition towards the topic we are asking about. And needless to say, the one who will be answering should be in that same frequency. Whatever is being asked is in terms of refining our service disposition. Whatever is being answered is in terms of further refining our service disposition. From both the questioner and the one who is replying to the question, both of them are performing seva to each other, even not only to Sri Harikatha, not only to their ideal, but to each other in the context of para bodayantaha parasparam, as Krishna says in the Gita, machchitamad gataprana, tusyanti charamanticha, nourishing each other, enlightening each other by speaking about the object, the mutual object of our affection, our Istadevata. We are to fall in love with the object of our affection. We are not just to worship our deity in terms of duty, but we are to passionately fall in love with the object of our affection. And for that, we need to fill our container with a particular type of disposition. And for this, of course, association is more than crucial. Krishna Prem Janmeten Punar Mukhyanga. Even when the goal of life has been attained, still satsanga remains the main expression of the attainment of that ultimate goal. Prem. So here we are, probably not having attained yet the ultimate goal, but nonetheless, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mulhai Sadhu Sangha. In every single chapter of our devotional sojourn, Sadhu Sangha remains a crucial expression of the journey, whether it be very beginning stages, intermediate stages, having attained the goal of life, and all the stages in between. Sadhu Sangha has been given this golden simhasana or lion throne, enthroned as a great topmost crucial aspect of our life. So here we are trying to embrace such conceptions. So that said, I don't know if there are any questions you may like to present today in the context of nourishing our exchange, nourishing our ideal, any topic you may like to ask about. One question has been already presented some days ago by Krishna Das from Brazil. So I will start with that one. And of course, if there are any other questions that you may have, of course, we can also continue. And here is, I think I see there is some questions from, Sakhya. Okay, so we will go to that one after, if it's no problem. And meanwhile, I will begin with one question by Krishna Das. So let me see where it is. So it says like this. If you have seen it, could you please share some thoughts on Syamarani Didi's recent podcast with Namarasa Prabhu? Okay. So yes, I've seen it some days ago. I don't remember when, but I had the chance of going through the episode. So yeah, I can share some words. Of course, I'll first of all, since Syamarani Dasi is a senior Vaishnavi, I offer my pranam to her. And to begin with, I have to say that I really emphasized her, I really liked, her emphasis on the, because the title of her presentation, for those who were not, for those who have not followed it, is Srila Prabhupada gave us everything. In the occasion of Srila Prabhupada's Tirobhab Mahotsav, she expressed many nice things about Prabhupada, about the concept of Tirobhab Mahotsav, Viraha Mahotsav. And also I appreciated, my point was that I appreciated especially her emphasis on the point of how Srila Prabhupada gave us Raganuga Bhakti, how the contribution of Prabhupada in terms of Raga Bhakti, how this Raga Bhakti is actually our path as Gaudiyas, basically, what Mahaprabhu came to distribute as a byproduct of his own relishment of Radha Bhakti. Prema Rasa Niryas Kariti Ashvadan Raga Marga Bhakti Loki Kariti Prachana. Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions. On one side, we have Mahaprabhu's main personal project, personal agenda, which is this threefold expression of his tasting of Radha Bhakti, that in brief Krishnadas Kaviraj is putting it as Prema Rasa Niryas Kariti Ashvadan. Kariti Ashvadan means to relish. What? Prema Rasa Niryas. This nectar of Prema Rasa, the still essence of Prema Rasa. And as a byproduct of that, or as my Guru Maharaj will say, as the overflowing of his own experience, Sriman Mahaprabhu engaged in Raga Marga Bhakti Loki Karite Prachara, in doing prachar of Raga Marga Bhakti in Loke, in this world, establishing in this world what we call Raga Bhakti or Raga Nuga Bhakti and so on. So I appreciated that point. I could feel that that was the main intention of her presentation, to try to point towards Srila Prabhupada in the context of that thing that really defines our Gaudiya Sampradaya and Mahaprabhu's gifts to the world. So to begin with, I really offer my respects to those points. And that said, also I respectfully disagree with some points that Syamarani Dasi presented in the context of making these important points of Raga Bhakti and what Mahaprabhu's dispensation is constituted of and so on. So I'll try to share some of those, hopefully in the best, most constructive and nourishing way for all of us to engage in proper Vaishnava ISTAGOSTHI and conversation and dialogue. So to begin with, I will mention a brief one, which is not maybe one of the main ones that I have in mind, but in the context of this, in the context of defining Raganuga Bhakti, of course, Syamarani Dasi very accurately went to the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti, or what is a Ragatmika, because you cannot speak about Raganuga without speaking about the Ragatmika, since the former implies following the latter. So, since Raganuga Bhakti means basically to follow in the footsteps of the Rag, of the Brajavasis, Ragatmika, the Brajavasis are the Ragatmikas. So, Syamarani described Ragatmika like, how to say, like someone who in their Atma, they have Rag. So, of course, in a general way, it's an accurate description, but in a specific, precise way, and these are quite precise terms, that definition is not so accurate, because Raga Atmika, the very word Raga Atmika, does not speak about someone who has in their Atma Rag, but someone whose Atma is made of Rag, which is a subtle but important difference. One thing is you have Rag, or you have received Rag. That's another topic that I will touch later. Or other thing is you are made of Rag. And the very word Raga Atmika means those people whose Atma is Rag, basically. And Atma in this case do not only means the Atma, as we sometimes may translate it as the soul, but Atma applies to body, mind, senses, everything from tip to toe. these Nitya Parishads, or these Ragatmikas, another way for referring to the Ragatmikas is to refer to the Nitya Parishads, or the eternal associates of Bhagavan. Yashoda, Nanda, Subal, Madhu, Mangal, Lalita, Vishaka, Rupa, Manjari, and so on. They are their own constitution. They are not Tatastha-sakti Jivas. Important definition. They are not Jivas altogether. The very term Jivas, specifically speaking, refer to an Atma being affected by material conditioning. But when the Atma is free from that conditioning, technically speaking, the term Jivas is not applied to them. So they are entities made of Sarup Shakti, basically, of the internal energy of Bhagavan. There is no Tatastha constitution. In their case, although of course also we have the example of someone like Garuda or some others who are mentioned in Shastra who are Nitya Parishads and at the same time Tatastha-sakti. So there is a possibility of Tatastha-sakti Nitya Parishads, but mostly the rule, if you will, apply in this connection are Sarup Shakti Nitya Parishads. So the point again, going back to the idea, is that a Ragatmika is not someone in whose Atma there is rag, or they have rag, but whose Atma is made of rag. Their whole being is made of rag. And then she gave some example to further illustrate her way of defining Ragatmika, which again, I have to disagree with, because it goes in another direction to what Shastra says, that is the example of white cloth put in red dye. So you put white cloth into red dye, of course, in the first attempt, it's somehow red, but eventually you need to put again and squeeze it out, and in different turns, eventually it becomes red, proper. But again, the analogy in this case is not fully accurate, because we are speaking about Ragatmikas. The Ragatmikas have never been white, no? Like the analogy of the white cloth becoming red. They never become Ragatmikas. They are always red, if you will. And red is, of course, the color for Raga. Raga, another way of defining Raga is with red, with attachment, passionate attraction. So again, it's a little point. I don't want to make too much of that, but it's just a technical difference that, for me at least, is a subtle but an important difference between what does it mean to be a Raganuga and a Ragatmika. Because again, and this goes in connection to the point, to be a Raganuga, which we aspire to be, we are not Ragatmikas. So we are trying to anuga, to engage in following off, to engage in tadatmya, in attaining some sameness, if you want to translate it somehow, with the mode of a particular Nitya Parishad. So that's what Raganuga Bhakti is in a glimpse, in a gist. So to be Raganuga means to acquire that Bhakti from the Ragatmikas. The very whole idea of being a Raganuga or engaging in Raga Bhakti is that we want to become affected, but a particular type, wave of Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti, that is present in the Ragatmikas, that is present in the Nitya Parishads, that we do not possess, basically. But such bhava, such Nitya Siddha bhava, such Nitya Siddha Prem, Krishna Nitya Siddha Prem, Sadhya Kavuna, that will descend from the heart of those personalities into our hearts by us engaging in sadhana and preparing the heart for that. That's the very definition of sadhana bhakti given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Kriti Sadhya Bhavet Sadhya Bhavasa Sadhanavidam Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya Prakatyamari Sadhyata, which is paraphrased by Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami with the famous verse Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kavuna, and so on. It says Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya, that Nitya Siddha Bhav, that eternally existent and perfect Bhav, manifests in the heart, appears in the heart after the heart has been prepared by engaging in sadhana. And of course, in the purport to that verse, both Jiva Goswami and Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mention how that Bhav is composed by the essence of the Sambit and Ladini Shaktis, which, as we know, are two of the three ingredients of the Sarup Shakti, which, as we know, is not inherent, is not part of the Tatastha-sakti Jiva's constitution, as is also mentioned in Shastra. So there are many other verses, of course, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu about how we develop a particular affinity towards a certain bhav according to the respective bhakti samskars, or what we acquire from sadhu sangha, from previous impressions. I don't want to torture you with this topic too much, but it seems to be a contemporary topic. So you can, if you want to see some references, you have Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu like 1-214 or 2-538 or 1-229, and apart from the ones I mentioned, and apart from the ones we have been sharing in our recent series. But in conclusion, we as Tatastha Jivas do not have that rag in us, because we do not have Swarup Shakti in our constitution as Tatastha-sakti. And all that again confirms that Bhakti, which is the essence of the Swarup Shakti, and it's not inherent in the Jiva in any aspect. Not even as a but it's inherent, if we want to speak in those terms, as what I may call a non-predetermined potential. Because even if we speak about we have the potential, sometimes we may say, and that's already predetermined. But no, it's not a predetermined potential. And this topic, although it's not strictly connected with the topic of the definition of Ragatmika, is closely tied to another point that Syamarani Dasi mentioned, which also I respectfully disagree with her permission and your permission as well, which is the idea that, and she quotes at one point this notion of inherent, not literally inherent bhakti, but she mentioned that in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita of Sri Sanatana Goswami, she says something like, we are all given, she speaks at the time of creation of manufacturing, we are all given a seed of a particular kind of relationship with Bhagavan. So, of course, I think that when she speaks about at the time of creation of manufacturing, I hope she's only basically trying to give a frame to the point, because as we know, there is no such time. There is no beginning to the jivas. There is no origin, point of beginning to the jiva is not created. The jiva is not manufactured. The jiva is not created. Bhagavan exists eternally along with his shaktis. Tatastha-sakti being one of them. Sarup Shakti, Maya Shakti. All the shaktis are already there. I know it's a difficult topic to pass through our head, but again, there's no beginning where the jiva is made out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo, or God determining something about us at one point in time, and before that was not there or something. So that's, of course, again, I want just to clarify that point just in case, but my main point here is that she mentions that we are given the seed of a particular kind of relationship with Bhagavan at the time of creation of manufacturing, or if you want, from time immemorial, we have as part of our constitution a seed of a particular kind of relationship with Bhagavan, which again I respectfully disagree with, and I'll try briefly to explain why. She refers to Brihad Bhagavatamrita and uses the term a particular type of taste. So this is connected with the idea, with one particular verse in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It's verse 24 and 190, quoted by Srila Sanatana Goswami, Vichitra Leela Vibhavasyatasya Samudra Koti Gahagasasya Vichitra Tatta Ruchidana Leela Vibhuti Mutkar Kayitum Prabhuka. So it's an interesting verse. I quote that in my forthcoming book and try to share some thoughts on that because it's very interesting. But it's interesting that actually this verse is actually confirming the opposite to what Syamarani Dasi is saying. And for that, let me see, I have here the translation of her Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj. So I'll go to that translation. It says, Sri Krishna's pastimes expand with ever new variety. His heart is as deep as millions of oceans. By logic, no one can understand the purpose for which he has placed different tastes in the hearts of his devotees and expanded the opulence of his pastimes accordingly. So the translation is clear. It speaks about Krishna placing different tastes for sure, but then it says in the heart of his devotees. So it's making a particular point there. It's not saying the hearts of every living being. which is a difference. Not that every jiva is a devotee of Krishna. Of course, potentially every jiva is a devotee of Krishna. But here it is mentioned in this particular point. It's not saying in every heart or in the heart of every jiva, but in the heart of every devotee. And in his, of course, in the verse in itself, if you go to the Sanskrit, the word devotee is not appearing. But in the context of the whole verse, I cannot go into further detail too much now. But you can understand that, and that's why someone like Bhaktivedanta Srilandaria Maharaj, he himself, in his translation, includes the term of his devotees. And mostly for this, I will say not only because of the context, but because of what Srila Sanatana Goswami, Prabhupada himself, mentions in his commentary to this verse. We know he has a self-commentary to his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the Darshini Tika. So he says, he further clarifies in his commentary that this verse refers to Krishna's devotees and not to every jiva. For example, he in one point mentions that Gopakumar may raise the doubt why Krishna does not equally inspire all devotees to have a taste for the topmost worship, which is a classical question. So again, you see very clear he's speaking about the devotees and the tastes we find among devotees. And why not everyone is inclined towards the objectively higher thing, if you will, which of course is a very important point in the whole Brihad Bhagavatamrita. As we know, Srila Sanatana Goswami tries to make his point, and I will speak about that later, since this book is the very first book of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and the main character of the book is not someone in the objectively speaking highest mood, Manjariba, but someone in Priyanarma Sakhya like Gopakumar, or Narad Muni in the other part of the book, who is Madhu Mangal, also in Sakhya Rasa, interestingly. So the question is presented here, but again, Sanatana Goswami mentions, paraphrases Gopakumar saying, why Krishna does not equally inspire all devotees? He isn't saying all jivas. And in answer to that, Sanatana Goswami in the commentary mentions that Narad Muni speaks this verse, the one we are discussing here, and he, Sanatana Goswami, paraphrases Narad Muni, mentioning that Krishna has placed a variety of extraordinary desires in the hearts of the devotees. Again, second time, of the devotees, endowing them with the special moods. So it's not saying in the hearts of every living being, but devotees. And then Sanatana Goswami, if this is not enough, Nikanyaya Nyaya, the pounding of the post, again confirms the same point at the end of his Tika, when he says, like Bhagavan has bestowed a very vast variety of tastes among his devotees. And in this way, he continues, Bhagavan expands the opulence of his manifold pastimes, and his devotees experience his grace according to their respective tastes. So over and over again, the word his devotees are there. Considering their respective moods to be the topmost, tasting those mellows related to those moods, they are all fully satisfied. What Krishnadas Kaviraj mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, every devotee feels the relationship with Krishna is the best, and everyone is correct. So a very wide and open-minded conception that we receive in this very first book of our Sampradaya. So it's interesting because I looked and I saw that Syamarani Dasi, she quoted this verse of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which clearly speaks about the devotees and not every single jiva. And she has quoted this verse in his book called The Swarup of the Jiva, at least 5 times that I could find. And in all of those cases, or almost most of those cases, every time that the verse says clearly, according to the translation of her own Gurudev, in the hearts of the devotees, she adds next to that in brackets, the jivas, or the living entities. But that's clearly her own addition, her own projection in that verse, not the intended meaning in the verse, not what Srila Sanatana Goswami says in the purport, basically, and not what it's stated overall throughout the whole Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Because even if you will make the case, this verse saying that somehow, still you have to harmonize that single verse with at least, I think, 100 verses which say the opposite. I have compiled those verses and I mentioned them in my forthcoming book, which clearly mentioned that this is not like that. There is no inherent bhakti, no inherent seed or particular taste put in the jiva at the moment of manufacturing or whatever. And then also in this connection, before going to another point, and sorry if I'm getting too long, also Syamarani Dasi gives the example of the gardener and the guru being a gardener, an expert gardener, which of course I agree with, but how, in which way he or she may be a gardener, that's another thing for sure. And in this particular case, of course, she makes the analogy in the context of her own intended point, that the guru is an expert gardener who is looking at the seed that we supposedly have inherent, and he knows which bush that seed is destined to be, which creeper, which tree. And therefore, the guru similarly will look at every soul and will be able to tell which inherent relationship each jiva will have with Krishna, and the guru will teach each student how to get that. But again, of course, as we always say, that's only an analogy. So an analogy in itself doesn't prove Siddhanta, it just serves to illustrate that which is it is to be proven through Shastra. And in Shastra, we find not that idea precisely. Every time that, whenever we hear about this idea of gardener, gardening, seed, and so on, we find actually the other idea. Brahmanda Brahmiti Kona Bhagyavan Jiva, Guru Krishna Prasada Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. The Guru is the giver of the seed of Krishna Bhakti. It's not the one who is seeing some seed that is already there and helping that to fructify, but the giver of the seed, which implies the seed was not there before. And the seed is Krishna Bhakti. And something interesting before going to the next topic that I, as an aside, but also connected, Syamarani Dasi quoted many verses in her presentation, which of course I really appreciate, because your points had to be presented with Shastra. So she was surrounded by many books that she mentioned. And she took the time to research all these verses and quote them literally by reading from the book. But when she quoted the verse, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mulha Sadasanga Krishna Prem Janmaten Punan Mukyanga, she has not given the literal translation of that verse, interestingly. I don't know why, but I may assume because the literal translation that you find even in the BBT's translation is that Krishna Bhakti Janma Mul Kai Sadasanga. Sadasanga is the root for the birth of Krishna Bhakti. And of course, Krishna Prem Janmaten Punar Mukyang. And even when we reaches Krishna Prem, that Sadhu Sangha remains, as I mentioned today, a crucial aspect of Mukhya Anga, main Anga of one's practice. But this verse clearly speaks about the birth of Bhakti and how that birth comes through Sadhu Sangha. So she mentioned basically something, she didn't say that, she said something like at the beginning of Bhakti, association with pure devotees is required, which with all respect is a little bit of an abstract, general, very overall way of saying something that actually is much more precise. So as an aside, but in connection to that point as well. And then this is actually an introduction to the maybe the main point that I may hopefully respectfully disagree with, which is the idea, two or 3 points, I should say, in connection to the ultimate reach of the Sampradaya, or so-called only option, and the notion to begin with. I will continue with the notion of Srila Prabhupada being in Manjari Bhav. And I know this is a very long topic and many discussions have been there, and maybe I won't be adding anything new to the exchange. But since the question was presented, which are my thoughts on that, I may share some ideas. So, of course, Syamarani Dasi presents the notion that Srila Prabhupada is in Manjari Bhav, Radha Dasyam, what we call Bhavalas, Rati, and all these different names for this same notion of being a Kinkari, or a personal maidservant of Sri Radha. And she quoted some things that Prabhupada say at times. For example, our goal is to enter the Rasa Lila, and things like this, which of course I'm not denying all the things that Prabhupada said in that connection. But I'm open to embrace all the things that Srila Prabhupada says, especially those things, as we will see, that he says very clearly about himself. Because in this type of notions, our goal is to enter Rasa Lila. Of course, we could say he's including himself there, but also he's speaking towards a rest of an audience. And I will personally propose that in those cases, he's mostly giving him the main general prospect available in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the main current, which is, of course, Manjari Bhav. Gaudiya Sampradaya is saturated with that. So that's the main current, let's say, in those terms. But I will say that that's presenting that main prospect. But when he spoke about himself in personal terms, in intimate terms, he clearly pointed into the direction of Sakhya Bhav. And specifically, we will see Priyanarma Sakhya Bhav. So there are some quotes, of course, many quotes about that. I don't want to torture you with that. I will share some few of them, which are taken from a publication called Oh My Friend, presented by Bhakti by Ashram Maharaj in conjunction with my Guru Maharaj some years back. And for those who are interested in delving into this topic into further detail and see all that Prabhupada say in this connection, you are invited to read the book. So first of all, it is mentioned there a very natural and common perception in the early times among Srila Prabhupada's disciples of themselves seeing Prabhupada as a Gopa. Almost all of them were thinking those terms. There were many Vyasa Puja offerings written to Prabhupada, speaking about him in terms of him being a Gopa. And interestingly, Prabhupada read them and he never stopped those, he never canceled that glorification. Well, he canceled all other type of speculations, if you want to call them, like the Gopi Bhava Club, as we know, and some other things that he really felt is a concoction. You are going beyond your capacity or whatever. But whenever his young disciples glorified him as a Gopa, he never say, you are speculating, shut up, stop doing that or something. So in this sense, I will say that his silence speaks for itself. But nonetheless, let's see what Srila Prabhupada himself has to say about this, because someone may say, well, those are the young Kanishta, the devotees, they are just being sentimental and saying something. But let's see what Prabhupada himself has to say. So one known example is that of Harsarani Devi, Harsarani Dasi, also a very special early disciple. And she told to Prabhupada once, you are a cowherd boy. She had a very unique relationship with Prabhupada, as was told by some of the early disciples. And Prabhupada, when he was told that, he said yes. And then Harsarani wrote a whole poem about Srila Prabhupada as an offering, Vyasa Puja offering. And in that poem, she clearly depicted Prabhupada as a Sakhya, as a Gopa. And which was Prabhupada's reply to that poem? She has become advanced. So you can imagine. And immediately he ordered, you have to publish this poem in the Back to Godhead magazine. So try to put all these things together. And he made that public to his main publication at the time. And he declared he has become advanced after she was saying almost in every line, you are a Gopa, you are a Gopa. Interestingly, Syamarani Dasi, she shares in her book, The Art of Spiritual Life, that Srila Prabhupada said in a well-known episode in the Bowery in the early times, that my desire is to be Krishna's friend. So she herself quotes that, but somehow she changed her mind after. And also a famous episode is that with Shrutakirti, which is mentioned also in Oh My Friend in the year 1975 in Atlanta. He was massaging Prabhupada, and at the time of the massage, it was only Prabhupada and his personal servants, so there was nobody else there. And Prabhupada was absorbed looking into a picture of Krishna Balaram. And he said to Shrutakirti, he himself is narrating that, I like the cowherd's voice very much. And then he starts to get absorbed into the narrative, the dynamics of that lila, saying like every day Krishna and Balaram go to the forest in Braj, but before they go, their mothers prepare lunches for them. How do you call tiffins in English? So Jashoda Rani will give her a very nice tiffin, and with puri, halava, ladu, kachori, especially more opulent than other tiffins. And Prabhupada, I'm making the whole narration short. There's much more he's saying in between. But Prabhupada is saying, I just want to go back to the spiritual world and eat kachori and ladu with Krishna. So that's a very clear reference to his entrance into that particular window of opportunity. Also in 1968, that's mentioned in the Lilamrita, Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by Sarup Das Goswami. He quotes Prabhupada saying this basically the same thing. I simply want to go to Krishna Lok so I can have some of Krishna's ladus and kachoris, and I do not have any great diversion from this, any other big great interest apart from this. I simply want to go there so I can enjoy eating ladus and kachoris with Krishna and the cowherd boys. And it is said that after that he was speaking this to some devotees, and he opened his eyes widely and said to one devotee called Devananda, he said like, oh, if you give me ladus and kachoris, then I will bless you. So all the devotees at that time, they did not know how to prepare. They say, you teach us how and we will prepare all the ones you want. And interestingly, then in the very last year of Prabhupada's stay in this world, 1977, in Vrindavan, he was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was describing to Srila Prabhupada the painting of Krishna with the Gopas having lunch together. And Prabhupada said, by hearing that narrative, again, picnic, lunch, full Sakhya playground, if you will, and Prabhupada said, this is the highest perfection of life. So again, on one side, he may say, our goal is to enter the Rasa Lila, but then he's saying Sakhya Rasa is the highest perfection of life. So we are not, as Srila Rupa Goswami said, to reject one thing and just take the one we like the most. We are to embrace all of the statements and try to make sense of them in the most mature, deep, objective way. Similarly, in one letter to Hamsadutta, in 1974, he's mentioning when they were presenting a German edition of this Hare Krishna cooking book, recite books. He says, and the picture had in the cover front picture was Krishna with the friends having lunch. So he says, especially the picture of Krishna and his friends eating, it's very glorious. We wish to join his party. So different ideas like this, no? Indradipna Swami also telling that once Prabhupada explained the Mahamantras, oh my friend, oh my friend. That's the meaning of Mahamantra. Or sometimes Prabhupada speaking even more like directly. I mean, for me, this is direct enough, but even more directly, it is recalled, mentioned, oh my friend, that once he spoke to Govinda Dasi saying in Seattle, 1968, he was talking about this and said, my Guru Maharaj's rasa is that of a gopi, Manjari, but I am in relationship with Krishna as a cowherd boy. So that's, I mean, the more direct you can get, I will say. So some ideas, no? Once also with Subal Das, an early disciple, he also recalled one incident when Prabhupada went for a visit to Adikesha Das, or famous, also known as Dr. O.B.L. Kapoor, writer, disciple of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta. And they were speaking about Siddha Deha, the topic of Siddha Deha. And Prabhupada said, this is not done in our line, like the bestowal, Siddha Pranali Ekadashva. And Prabhupada then said, one must realize this relationship for oneself. You cannot just like jump ahead. And he says, when one is ripe and ready, it will be revealed from within. I am a cowherd boy, he said after that. And similarly, again, in 1977, last year of his stay in this world, in one discussion on inauthentic gurus, Srila Prabhupada says, Swarup Siddhi means that when you are actually liberated, you understand what is your relationship with Krishna. That is Swarup Siddhi, Sakhya. He mentioned that as a closing. And if you want to say, but we are Gaudiyas or we are Rupanugas, and for us, Manjari Bab is the all in all, there's nothing else apart from that. Well, Prabhupada had some other thoughts in mind. Once in an interview, in a talk that is registered with Hrishi Keshananda Prabhu, he said once to Prabhupada, so that means that our relationship with you, we as disciples with you, Prabhupada, our relationship is eternal. So that means our relationship will continue in Nitya Lila. And of course, Prabhupada said yes. And then Hrishi Keshananda, he said, as Manjaris, and Prabhupada replied, down to Sakhya. So he made this place. He very clearly wanted to have a place for Sakhya Bhava. And of course, we can, apart from what Prabhupada say, which for me is more than enough because it's really clear and overt. But for example, you have the evidence that he put Krishna Balaram in the central altar in his Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada said many times, Vrindavan is my home. So if Vrindavan is his home and his central Istadeva is Krishna Balaram, the highest tower is there, I mean, that speaks for itself again. Or even regarding some arguments, sometimes they would say, no, but he sang Guru Astakam and established that in every temple to be sung in the morning, and verses 6 and especially 5 speak about Manjari Bhav, but not necessarily it's only about Manjari, Guru being a Manjari. Priyanarma Sakha can enter into that equation. For example, also in my friend is quoted that in one explanation of this sixth verse to Jaya Pitaka Maharaj's letter, Prabhupada say that on the whole, the spirit, the guru is an agent of Krishna, but either he is an assistant to the gopis or assistant to the cowherd boys. Whatever the case, he's on the level of Krishna. But he mentions these two opportunities. Or also another argument, similarly, in connection to another song, is Jaya Radha Madhava, which Prabhupada sang daily before every class. So some people may say, that's only for Madhurya Bhav. So that shows he's in Madhurya Bhav. But in 1971, and this also included, I'm just sharing some few words, go to on my friend book for further detail. In 1971, he explained that this song is saying that it celebrates Krishna's original nature as the focus of all rasas of Braj. In other words, the song is including Yashoda, Nandana, Brajajana, Ranjana, all the Brajajanas, all the Brajavasis, the gopis, of course, Sri Radha, and the friends as well. Many things he says there, he ends up saying basically at the end of he said many things, I won't go there, but at the end he says that everyone can go to Krishna Lok, to Golok, and become Krishna's associate as a friend, or so many other things, as a servant, as father, as mother. Interestingly, here he doesn't even mention Manjari, and he starts with as a friend. And he says, and Krishna is agreeable to any of these propositions. He's not saying, if you come saying, I'm a Gaudiya, I'm a Rupanuga, I want Sakhya, Krishna won't reject you, saying, no, you can only come from Manjari Baba or something. And of course, there are many other considerations which may be considered secondary by some, like Prabhupada's connection with the Suvarnabhani community, which was specially favored by Nityananda Prabhu, who of course is Sakhya Rasa personified. Srila Prabhupada's early also connection, worship of the patron saint of the Suvarnabhaniks, which is Udaranadatta Thakur, or some of the intense expressions of Prabhupada in Judavira Ras. But just let me finish before going to another point, and this may take some time, sorry for that. But one of the most famous statements of Prabhupada to this effect is the famous prayer at the lotus feet of Krishna. What Prabhupada is very privately, in a private moment, writing this poetry, which was not meant to be published. And he's addressing Krishna there in the mode of Priyanarma Sakha, saying directly to Krishna's Bhai. Krishna Taba Punya Havi Bhai. Bhai means like friend, some term you use to speak in equals, and starts to bargain with him as a Priyanarma Sakha will do. Krishna Taba Punya Havi Bhai, e Punya Karive Jave Radharani Kushi Thave, Dhruva Ati Boli, Thoma Bhai. Thai, sorry. So he says basically, oh Bhai, oh friend, you, Krishna, you will acquire punya, you will acquire some sukriti or merit if you obtain the favor of Sri Radha. She's pleased with you. And my Guru Maharaj comes from her camp, he's Barshavanavani Daita, Das. So he wants me to go to the West and preach. So if I want to please him, and he will please her. If she's pleased, you will be favored. So you have, please give me the Shakti to do the bidding of my Gurudev. My Gurudev will be pleased, Sri Radha will be pleased, and you will be favored. And this is a very fixed truth, like the Dhruva pole star. And then, of course, after starting in this unique mood, very private moment, he says, Kattabana Chitta Chitta Kailita Putti Saidin Kavihavi more. So we will run and frolic in the many forests of Braj, and I will roll on the ground in spiritual ecstasy. Oh Krishna, when will that day will be mine? Kavi Havi, Saidin Kavi Havi more. So again, very clear expression of Sakhya Bhav and Priyanarma Sakhya Bhav, more specifically according to the beginning. And this was further confirmed by great personalities. When Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj heard about this from my Guru Maharaj, he presented that to Srila Puri Maharaj, this Jaladutta prayer. And Srila Puri Maharaj, after hearing the lines, he says Sakhya. Immediately, he could recognize that. And then my Guru Maharaj said to him, yeah, but some devotees say that if our Guru Maharaj is in Sakhya Bhav, that's a problem, because he's not in Manjari Bhav, and almost everyone is in Manjari Bhav. And if you want that, you may not be able to receive that. And Srila Puri Maharaj said, as my Guru Maharaj retells that, Baba, if you think that your Guru Maharaj is in Sakhya and that is a problem, then you have a problem by thinking it that way. And similarly, when Srila Siddhar Maharaj was shared this song, he already knew the song, the poem by heart. Srila Siddhar Maharaj confirmed that Prabhupada was in Sakhya Bhav. There's a very long, detailed expression of this in Oh My Friend. So although different acharyas may have said different things in this regard, because of course I'm aware that some other great personalities may have said otherwise, even if you want to say, no, but my Guru Maharaj say this, or this great personality say that, okay, we will try to entertain all the possibilities, but I will say the ultimate point here is what Srila Prabhupada himself said about him in no uncertain terms. And that was even confirmed, as I mentioned here, by his godbrother, most intimate godbrother, Srila Bhakti Goswami Maharaj, who was also his most intimate friend, who was considered by Srila Prabhupada his Siksha Guru. So again, all this evidence has to be put on the scale when concluding something so specific as to Srila Prabhupada's inner identity. So that will be some points I will present in connection to what Syamarani Dasi says, that Srila Prabhupada is in Manjari Bhav. Also in connection, to go to another topic, in connection to the previous one, Syamarani Dasi also mentioned that basically every one of our acharyas in our lineage, coming from Rupa Goswami or our Gaudiya Sampradaya, was a Manjari. And I will say the implication of that will be, and therefore Srila Prabhupada must be Manjari Bhava as well. So again, I will respectfully disagree with that. And please do not take this as Maharaj is trying to pick on Syamarani Das and trying to disagree publicly and pick a fight or something, but just there are some public statements being made and someone asks about that. I'm sharing my opinion. I think as a sannyasi, my duty and service to my Gurudev and the Gaudiya community is also to share thoughts and to share ideas based on Shastra and verse of certain evidence in the spirit, hopefully, of healthy conversation. And hopefully this helps for us to broaden our spectrum of dialogue and conception. So again, if we say, okay, we belong to the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, let's begin with that particular idea. So if we will like to say everyone in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya is in Manjari Bhav. I'm not saying Syamarani say that, she started from Rupa Goswami, but I will extend the idea a little bit further. We will have to go to the very first member of our parampara, which is Brahma. Of course, Krishna is the very first one, but let's go to Brahma. And Brahma himself is in Sakhya Bhava. That's clearly confirmed both by Srila Prabhupada as well as by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the purport to the famous verse in the Bhagavatam, the context of the Bhagavad Chaturshloki, what it say that Krishna shook hands with Brahma as a friend. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport to that verse, 2930, just in case in the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada says, Lord Brahma is definitely situated in the humor of friendship with the Lord. And 3 times he said the same, almost the same thing in the purport. So he uses this clear term, definitely situated in Sakhya Bhava. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he's paraphrasing Brahma in his purport, saying, may I attain bhakti with a feeling of friendship. So Sakhya Bhava. So in the beginning of our Sampradaya, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, we have Sakhya Bhava at its very root. But if someone may say, no, but we want to speak in terms of our Sampradaya, Gaudiya Sampradaya, as something started from what Mahaprabhu came to give, what he tasted, and what is extended through his associates. Okay, so then we can speak about one of the 2 Samasti Gurus of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, as they are presented by Krishna Das Kaviraj, which is Sri Nityananda along with Mahaprabhu, and Sri Nitai is Baladev, Sakhya Rasa personified. A whole of different lineages came through Nityananda Prabhu, deeply steeped into Sakhya Rasa. Those coming from the Dwadasa Gopals, the main associate of Nityananda, who were the very first who started preaching and initiating in large scale. That's how the Gaudiya Sampradaya first started to expand, interestingly. And we have some other cases, for example, the Guru of Shyamananda Pandit, Hriday Chaitanya, he was in Sakhya Bhava. Gauridas Pandit, he was Subal Saka as well. And if you want to go to more contemporary sadhus, closer to our time, we have the famous case of Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj, disciple of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, who was universally acknowledged as a Siddha Mahapurush by everyone. And the fact that he was in Priyanarma Sakhya Bhav was further confirmed by Srila Siddhar Maharaj, and even by Srila Narayan Maharaj. When my Guru Maharaj spoke in private, in person with Srila Narayan Maharaj, and he mentioned the example of Krishnadas Babaji being in Sakhya Rasa, Srila Narayana Maharaj confirmed that as well. So we find examples again. I'm not against Manjari Bhav, and I'm not against acknowledging that Manjari Bhav is the main current, the main dispensation, and the objectively speaking highest reach in terms of rasa in our sampradaya. But that's not to be made to the point of totally dismissing the possibility of another options. And as I mentioned before, interestingly, if we go to the very first book of our Gaudiya Sampradaya, the books that came after Mahaprabhu, very first book is that Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And in that book, Srila Sanatana Goswami makes very important points. And one of them is the central reference for the main first book of the Sampradaya is someone in Sakhya Bhava, Priyanarma Sakhya Bhava, Gopa Kumar. And the other part of the book, Narad Muni, who is Madhu Mangal, Sakhya Bhava. Or if we want to go to a very important and more contemporary book in our particular Bhakti Not Parivar, Jaiva Dharma from Srila Thakur Bhaktivinoda, here, there, in the main part of the book, the two main characters, Rajanath and Vijay Kumar, one of them is in Sakhya Bhava, and the other one, of course, is in Manjari Bhava. So the fact that they are presenting these options, these cases, these characters, this opportunity, it means there is place for that. There's not something to be totally dismissed in the name of one exclusive highest attainment. And of course, in a wider way, Mahaprabhu himself, through the pen of Krishnadas Kaviraj, mentions in his Chaitanya Charitamrita that Gaur came to give Charibhav to the world. Charibhav, the four bhavs of Raj, starting with Dasya, Dasa, Sakhya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, if you want to even further extend the possibility beyond Madhurya and Sakhya. So again, for me, that, and of course, to say that Srila Prabhupada is steeped into Sakhya Bhav doesn't mean that he failed in giving us everything. Because as again, Thakur Bhaktivinoda shows in Jaiva Dharma, the Guru is showing himself, he himself is in a particular bhav, he appears in a particular manifestation towards his two disciples, one as Subal, another as Lalita. He's appearing to them to nourish their particular affinity. And so we can say that, of course, someone like Srila Prabhupada can give Manjari Bhav to his disciples, can inspire that in them if they have that particular affinity. Or, of course, we could say he also gave us everything by giving us, or by connecting his students to other sadhus who are deeply steeped in Manjari Bhav. So for me, this is an important point to make, because I have shared some evidence that it's clear that in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, of course, the main, as my Guru Maharaj will say, the supporting role is Sakhya Bhava, and the main role is Manjari Bhava, Madhurya Bhava for sure, but not to the point of excluding all the other rasas. I will call that the rasism, to be racist in the context of rasa. So again, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, and that's our spirit, whatever a particular devotee, whatever relationship a particular devotee has with Bhagavan, that's the best for him. So maybe one more point, if you allow me, and I will give myself some extra minutes to reply to the question of Sakyarati, which I see in the chat, and maybe I see that there are more than one, so let's see if I can reach all of them. So one more point that I will respectfully disagree with Syamarani and Dasi is the idea that to be a Rupa Nuga means to serve Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Rupa Manjari, and all this again implies to be situated in Manjari Bhav, because if you are only serving Rupa Goswami but not Rupa Manjari, yourself aspiring for Manjari Bhav, then you are not a Rupa Nuga, but you are a Raga Nuga. So to begin with, this is not something mentioned in Shastra. Of course, the term Rupa Nuga is there, but that particular type of exclusive definition is not present there. And of course, also sometimes the idea, and Syamarani Dasi also mentioned this notion, is to invoke the prana mantra of someone like Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he says Rupa Nuga Viruddha Apa Apsiddhanta Dvanta Harine. But the point is that someone may say, okay, Rupa Nuga Viruddha Apa Apsiddhanta Dvanta Harine. To follow Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, you have to be a Rupa Nuga, and that implies Manjari Bhav. But this verse is being celebrated, or Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta is being celebrated here to be very averse to anything that is different from Rupa Goswami's mood. So of course, here we do not mean that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta is averse to someone who is not in Manjari Bhava. But actually, it says that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta will not tolerate any statement which is contrary to the teachings and Siddhanta. Actually, the term in the verse is not mood. It's not saying Rupa Nuga, Viruddha Apa Bhava, or something, but Viruddha Apa Siddhanta. So the term is whatever is Apa Siddhanta in connection to Rupa Goswami's teachings, that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta wouldn't tolerate. So the verse is not saying that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta never tolerated any mood different from Rupa Manjari Bhava or something. So Tattva and Siddhanta are different things. Of course, are interconnected. They are related, but they are two different things at the same time. So in Siddhanta, of course, as we always say, we aspire to be one. Because we belong to a one same sampradaya, and sampradaya means a school of thought that gives a particular current, a particular siddhanta, a particular type of thought. So we are one in siddhanta because we belong to the same sampradaya, and that allows for the diversity of bhava. Bhava may differ on the foundation of siddhanta. So we have a place for accommodating that. Actually, our goal is Vrindavan and Braj, as Jiva Goswami describes at the beginning of the Gopal Champu. He says, Braj is that place where everything is properly everything finds its proper place. Everything is duly accommodated. Everything harmonized. Srila Namarasa will say, Hari Bhagati Primnashra Bhavati Lavabit. Love moves like a snake in a crooked way because it harmonizes everything on its way. So the variety of bhavas that different devotees may express in the context of a particular lineage is not necessarily a problem or fault or defect. It's actually a bhushan, an ornament. And interestingly, if we go to how Srila Prabhupada himself, for example, referred to the term Rupa Nuga, and here I'm referring again to some quotes found in Oh My Friend. You can go there for further detail. Srila Prabhupada, whenever he speaks about Rupa Nuga, he intends this broader and more inclusive sense of being a Rupa Nuga. You can follow Rupa Goswami's teaching, all Gaudiyas do, but you can have an affinity towards Sakhya Bhav or other Bhav and still be a Rupa Nuga. Not necessarily you have to become a Manjari in order to be a Rupa Nuga. Srila Prabhupada repeatedly prefers that following Rupa Goswami implies following him in terms of following his instructions as given in Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu, which includes all Gaudiya Vaishnavas follow Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu, but Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu is not depicting Manjari Bhav exclusively. Almost it does not speak of Madhurya Bhav actually. He has a separate treatise for that, Ujjwal Nilamani. So my point is, if you only follow Manjari Bhav, then why Rupa Goswami is depicting all these other Bhavs in Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu? There's no place for that. And of course, one can say, no, he depicts them in order to establish the supremacy of Manjari Bhav and so on, or Madhurya Bhav. That's a point, of course, you can make. But again, at the same time, I mean, Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu is showing a very wide scope of possibilities. Rupa Goswami is never saying, this is the only chance, this is the only thing. So and Prabhupada himself defined the term Rupa Nuga in this term, including all Gaudiya Vaishnava, which are especially in the concept of working together to spread the teachings of Mahaprabhu. Because again, if only those in Manjari Bhav are Rupa Nugas, I mean, Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu is not written for Rupa Nugas because depicting so many other Bhavs. And not only Srila Prabhupada gave this idea, but interestingly also Syamarani Dasi's Gurudev, Srila Narayan Maharaj, in his book Acharya Keshari, which is the life of his Srila Narayan Maharaj's own Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Kesh Maharaj, there's Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, he's mentioning, considering all Gaudiya Vaishnavas to be Rupa Nugas. There he mentions that each and every Gaudiya Vaishnava is proud to call himself Rupa Nuga. And we have seen that not every Gaudiya Vaishnava is steeped into Manjari Bhav. So they are Rupa Nuga nonetheless. So again, hopefully with deep respect and appreciation for Syamarani Das's points and contribution that I tried to mention in the beginning, I offer these ideas in that service and in complement, hopefully. So now I see in the chat that there are like 6 more questions. Oh my God. So I'll try to go to some of them. Let's see where do we end. So there is one question by, oh, wait a minute, by Sakhya. Well, wait, because there are so many things here, I'm getting lost. Yes, Sakhya. Can you say something about Sri Gadadhara Das Goswami, whose disappearance day is today? He's in Madhurya Bhav, but associating mainly with devotees in Sakhya Bhav. Sri Gadadhara Das Goswami ki jai. Yes, well, to begin with, we have different dates because in the sense of, I'm in India and you're in another part of the world, most of you. So in India, all the celebrations will actually take place tomorrow here. So tomorrow here will be Gopastami. Tomorrow here will be Subal Besh Milan, the writing of Mukta and the disappearance of Gadadhara Das Goswami and Srinivasa Acharya and Dhananjaya Pandit as well, all that in the same day. So I know that in your place in Europe or in States, America, it's today. Here it's tomorrow, but of course we can say something about that. So Gadadhara Das, it's important to make the difference that he is not to be mistaken with Gadadhara Pandit. So we have two Gadadhars, if you will, in Gaur Lila. One of them is Gadadhara Das or Gadadhara Das Goswami, and the other one is Sri Gadadhara Pandit. So as we already know, Sri Gadadhara Pandit is Sri Radha in Gaur Lila, blessing Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself by allowing him to be successful in his Gaur Lila project by giving her bhav or his bhav. But also we have Gadadhara Das Goswami, which is a different entity, but somehow it's connected. In Gaur Ganadesh Deepika, Srila Kavi Karnapur is describing Gadadhara Das Goswami in connection to Chandrakanti, which is a manifestation of like the opulence of Sri Radha. But also interestingly, he mentions, because that's connected to your question in connection with Sakhya, he speaks about someone called Purnananda, who is someone very close or dear to Sri Baladev, someone in Sakhya Bhav, who also has entered into Gadadhara Das with some special purpose. So it's a particular personality, as we could say, with some mixed personalities and influence. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also described like Gadadhara Das as the effulgence of Sri Radha, maybe in connection to the name Chandrakanti. Kanti means also effulgence. So he's like an incarnation, if you want to use the incarnation, like a manifestation of the bodily luster on one side of Sri Radha. So Gadadhara, we know that Mahaprabhu is Krishna in the mood of Radha coming in her bhav and with her Radha Bhava Dyuti Shubhalitam Nomi Krishna Swarupam. So he's coming Radha Bhava Dyuti. Radha Bhav, Radha Dyuti, Shubhalitam. So he's endowed with Radha Bhav, he's endowed with Radha Dyuti or Radha Kanti, with the luster. So somehow Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta connects Gadadhara Das with this particular luster, basically. Or sometimes, as we mentioned in the Gaur Ganadesh Deepika, he's connected with the opulence of Radha, which somehow we may connect it with the luster, if we will, as well, which is connected to the bhava at the same time. Now, the real ultimate opulence of Sri Radha is her bhava. That's the opulence Krishna wants to take. And the external luster is an expression of what's going on inside. Strictly speaking, there is no difference between inside and outside in someone like Sri Radha. But at the same time, again, there is this Sakhya Rasa side to Gadadhara Das. So in this sense, since Purnananda is a close associate to Balaram, Gadadhara Das Goswami is considered like a follower of Mahaprabhu, but also a follower of Nityananda. As a follower of Mahaprabhu, to say that he was, and being who he was in connection to Radha's Kanti, he's described as tasting this conjugal mellow, but interestingly, as a follower of Sri Nitai, he's described as someone being connected with Sakhya Bhav. So Gadadhara Das, this is mentioned in one Anubhashya, in one commentary by Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta to Chaitanya Charitamrita. He's considered, technically speaking, an associate of Sri Nityananda in Gaur Lila. But although he's technically considered an associate of Nityananda, you may think in terms of the Dwadasa Gopal, it is said that his mood of friendship is not that of a cowherd, but actually he's considered as steeped in the conjugal mood. And it is said that he established one temple of Mahaprabhu in Katwa, interestingly, where Sri Chaitanya Deva accepted sannyas, basically. So there are some other things that can be said, but basically that's like the difference, no? Gadadhara Das Goswami representing the aura or the luster of Sri Radha. Of course, Gadadhara Pandit representing the bhava, the nature, the heart of Sri Radha. But we have these two sides to it. I think, of course, there are some other things we could say in connection to the life of Gadadhara Das Goswami in pastimes, but the question is not so much in this direction, so I won't reply to that. No? But at least one that may speak a little bit about this situation. No? So one is say that when Nityananda Prabhu arrived to Bengal, and he visited different villages there on the both sides of the Ganges, and Gadadhara Das was experimenting Gopi Bhav. Again, remember this point of his being steeped into Madhurya Bhav. So he took a jar full of water from Ganga Jal, water from the Ganges, and he started to tell everyone, milk, who wants to buy milk? Who wants to buy milk? Fully engrossed in the mood of a gopi. And Nityananda saw the bhava of Gadadhara Das, and he took the deity of Gopal that was in his house, and he started to dance with the deity on his chest. And in Chaitanya Bhagavat, this is described that in the mood of a gopi, Gadadhara Das was not aware of. He was totally engrossed in that, not aware of, not having external consciousness, and he constantly referred to himself as a gopi. So again, he's mostly established in that mood, but somehow he hangs out, you say, he's roaming with the group of Sri Nityananda. So some ideas in connection to Sri Gadadhara Das Goswami ki jai. So let's see. So Kanuram Prabhu, he says, I had a similar question about Gadadhara Das, who is mentioned in the expanded translation of the second verse of Chaitanya Bhagavat, the two Gadadhars. So I don't know which is the question, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think you covered it.
It's included in what I said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Definitely. So there are some other questions, I think, coming from YouTube that Sakhya is sharing. So I'll try to go through all of them, hopefully, maybe a little bit more brief. One question from PNS in YouTube. It says, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives swasthya or health, sadhana and seva as important things in the spiritual life of a devotee. My question is, what's the difference between sadhana and seva? And there's a continuation from the question. It says, because chanting is both sadhana and seva, also deity worship. Okay. So I will have to check the context of the particular statement to really be more accurate in my reply, because as you mentioned, these terms can be used to refer to the other, basically, in some cases. So I will prefer to go to the original eventually. So eventually, if you can share the specific context, we can go through that. But I will share some intimation that I think it's referring to, because that's the general way in which sometimes sadhana and seva are depicted as two different things. So sadhana will refer mostly, yes, to one's sadhana, to one's daily commitment with the practice in the form of chanting a certain rounds and worshipping Archa Vigraha, Srimurti, and hearing Shastra, Bhagavat Shravan, Shradai, Murtir Sevan, and so on. And the word seva is there, as you properly mentioned, to serve the deity, because actually the word seva means to please the object of our affection. basically. So we could say everything we do ideally is seva. So there's no even need to speak about swasthya or health, because whatever we try to do in that context, we take care of our body in the context of seva. So everything could merge into this notion of seva. But in this particular case, I will say that seva is connected to more practical services, like serving the guru and serving the Vaishnavas and doing different daily services, which may be considered, how to say, not necessarily Swarup-Siddha Bhakti, but other activities like on the daily basis, sometimes called menial services that you could do in the context of living in the ashram or in any ashram you may be. You should be in one ashram ideally, whatever it may be. Cleaning the toilet and brooming, using the broom in the house and cooking and washing the clothes of Sri Gurudev. Like this type of menial, simple, practical services, which are important also, I will say, to make us land on because in eternity even we will be really engaged into those services even more than in sadhana, at least in Golok, if you will, in Golok Vrindavan, you won't be chanting your daily lag or studying the Bhagavatam. You will be living in the Bhagavatam, you will be living in the lag, and you will be passing the broom and making camphor lamps and doing so many practical things and cleaning the toilet. You find so many incredible prayers. I don't know, the Raghunath Das Goswami in Bilab Kusumanjali praying like about cleaning Sri Radha's toilet with her braid, as Tulsi Manjari, and this type of detailed description about really very menial services. So I will say that in this case, Thakur Bhaktivinoda is referring to seva in that context, like saying, take care of in the name of sadhana, do not neglect your health. In the name of sadhana, do not neglect your seva. Your seva, in this case, these more practical things that could be seen as more relative and not so high, but actually are really crucial if expressed in the proper context. But again, some idea without knowing the specific context, but I think that that's connected to that. And if it's not, generally, the notion of seva is really applied a lot in that connection, separate from sadhana to make that particular point. But again, all of that is sadhana, all of that is seva, if you will. Because if you go to the limbs of sadhana bhakti, you also find Vishrambena Guru Seva, Sadhu Margana Sarana. In that you have all these varieties of menial services I'm mentioning, and that's one anga of sadhana. So you can make one term the other, if you will, and play with the two of them, but that's the main idea. There's one quote shared here from Sakyarati Devi and Shyamananda from Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshu Maharaj in connection to my first reply. It says, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshu Maharaj says, he's mentioning a specific, I think, quote that I was referring to. Oh, no, I referred to one from Srila Narayana Maharaj. This is one from Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshu Maharaj. He says, in the name of Rupa Nuga Bhajan, the Ichchate Paka, those who pretend to be mature before being mature, the Ichchate Paka Sahajas, okay, who have strayed from the path, accept only Parakya Madhurya Rasa as Bhajan. They have concluded that there is no other rasa such as Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, and so on within Rupa Nuga Bhajan. This indeed reveals the Sahaja cult's ignorance of Rasa Tattva and its waywardness. Okay, I think that's crystal clear. I don't want to add anything because that's totally clear. This is coming from Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshu Maharaj's words, which is Srila Narayana Maharaj's words, which very clearly mentions that within Rupa Nuga Bhajan, there is place not only for Parakya Bhav, but for other rasas as well. And if you do not wish to accept that, well, according to what is said here, the term Sahaja comes into the picture. So, of course, we don't want that. Okay, so one last question that I will address, coming also from YouTube, from Asul Floor, which will be translated in English as blue flower or flower blue. It says, here Vilas Manjari from Brazil, I have a doubt. If we are Tatastha, we are not made from the same nature of the Ragatmikas, then how we can aspire to go there? Yes, that's an important question. And that is closely tied to the very definition of being Tatastha, actually. Actually, if we play out all that it means to be a Tatastha, in one sense, the question would not be there. But of course, I totally appreciate your question as part of unfolding our understanding of what Tatastha means. So Tatastha basically means not here, not there. Tatastha, which means to be situated into the Tata. Tata means sometimes like the imaginary line between the beach and the sea, which is not a line you can put your finger on. So it means basically that our nature and constitution is that we lend ourselves towards adaptability according to the environment we're in, whether it may be Maya Shakti or Swarup Shakti. We will accordingly develop a sense of identity. You take out those two environments, there is no sense of identity whatsoever. That's what we call Brahma Sayuja. When an Atma gets freed, neti, from all upadhis, from all type of designations, whether it be material or transcendental, there is no remaining sense of I am something. It's just that I amness. So Tatastha means, of course, till now we have mostly experienced as Bada Jivas. What does it mean to be Tatastha Bada Jiva, which means my tendency towards adaptability is expressed in connection to a material environment, and a distorted sense of being comes as a result, which is of course not fully satisfactory. But if we put ourselves under the shelter of the Swarup Shakti, under the shelter of Bhakti, our fullest potential as Tatastha Jivas comes out. Mahatmanastu mam partam daibhim prakritim ashrita, says Krishna in the Gita. You are an Atma now, you can become a Mahatma. And that doesn't mean to follow Mahatma Gandhi, with all respect to Sri Gandhiji. Here I am in India, I cannot criticize him. He's in every rupee paper. So Mahatma means to be a great soul. Of course, we are not speaking about physical size, but expansion, potential, highest possible reach of the Atma is to be a Mahatma. And Krishna says in the Gita, Mahatma, which is a term he exclusively uses for his bhaktas, is someone who is daibhim prakritim ashrita, who has taken shelter into the divine nature. Another way of saying Swarup Shakti. So again, we as Tatastha, we are to be defined according to our environment. So if our environment is Maya Shakti, we are defined as Bada Jivas, and we are not reaching our ultimate potential. We are actually, our configuration is not finding its highest fulfillment. It's in Maya Shakti. I think we all have clear experience of that. And the conclusion is, where is that fulfillment? Not necessarily just getting rid from the Maya Shakti, but Srila Jiva Goswami describes in his Priti Sandarbha, in Priti. Priti means that place where the Jiva, objectively speaking, the Jiva will reach its highest level of possible fulfillment and potential. And Priti means Prem, divine love. So again, Tatastha means we can adapt to the environment, and the best fit we can make with a particular environment is between Tatastha Shakti and Swarup Shakti, which is another way of speaking about us as Raganugas and Ragatmikas. So we are not Swarup Shakti Jivas, and we will never be Swarup Shakti entities. We are Tatastha Shakti. Srila Jiva Goswami makes his point clear in his commentary to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think 112. He uses the word Tadatmya. So Tatastha Shakti can attain Tadatmya in connection to Swarup Shakti. Tadatmya means like sameness, like similarity, closeness. He's not using words like ekatva or unity, total identity, absolute. So we do not become Swarup Shakti, but our Tatastha constitution lends itself to nurture in such a way that when the Swarup Shakti is entering into our hearts, it perfectly combines and fits with our Tatastha constitution to the point of having a subjective experience of being one with that Swarup Shakti and having our eventual Siddha Deha and spiritual identity under its shelter. So again, how it is possible for us to aspire to go there? Because our very constitution is designed, if you want to tell it in some way, in such a way that it will find its perfect match or its ultimate potential in that particular land or realm. So I hope that helps, and I think there are no more questions. So I will finish here today, wishing you very joyful and blessed almost last week of Kartik. So I'm hoping to see you next Thursday for sure. For those who are there, Sri Gopastami ki jai, Sri Shubal Besh Milan ki jai, Sri Mukta Charit ki jai, Tirubhap Mahotsav Titi Gadadhara Das Goswami ki jai, Tirubhap Mahotsav Titi Dhananjaya Pandit ki jai, Tirubhap Mahotsav Titi Sri Srinivasacharya ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Kartik Brat ki jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sadhu Sangha ki jai, Gaur Praman Hari Bo. Vancha Kalpatarugasa, Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.